UFC 282 took place this past Saturday, and I'm going to give a recap of the event. It was a great event overall, one of the best cards of the year. And even though this wasn't like overly stacked, there weren't any massive names on the card, it still delivered because there were some really good matchups and there were a lot of entertaining fights and finishes. I've already went over the main event and I've went over the Paddy Pimblett fight in my last two videos. I think the main event was excellent. A good competitive fight. I thought it was the right call to score it as a draw. Magomed Ankalaev clearly won the last two rounds and got a 10-8 in one of them, and Jan Blachowicz got the first three. So I thought it was an underrated fight, and it got some shit from Dana White, but I think he was just coping with his anger for the fact that Paddy Pimblett lost to Jared Gordon. So Santiago Ponzinibbio, Alex Morano, great scrap. Really good fight, but I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm kind of going to skip over this. I mean, there's not too much to break down. It's a good old-fashioned scrap between two guys that are a little bit old that won't really make the rankings. So, great knockout for Santiago Ponzinibbio. The guy's tough as nails. All right, so now let's talk about Darren Till and Dricus du Plessis. The first thing that I noticed is that Darren Till's grappling absolutely sucks. And I saw someone comment on my TikTok page last week when I said that Darren Till had really bad grappling. He was easy to take down. That, yeah, it's pretty good takedown defense, bro. Look at the stats. You're acting like he's easy to take down. He is. He's getting taken down like he's made out of feathers. And he just has, it's not even only the strength. Clearly he's, a little bit undersized at the middleweight division, and he's not that strong. And Dricus du Plessis is a unit, and his grappling is underrated. But it's also just based on the fact that he's an awful technical wrestler. He doesn't know how to stuff takedowns. I mean, you did all this training with Khamzat Chimaev for absolutely nothing. I mean, that was the hole in your game. Well, there's another hole that's also the fact that he never even throws anything besides a left hand. He had a great moment in the second round where he landed a good elbow on Dricus' face, even stunned Dricus, but wasn't able to capitalize because he hurts Dricus. Dricus has his guard up like this, and Darren Till throws like 5 left hands in a row. When he's got his guard like this, his opponent, 5 left hands in a row. That's all he throws. And I said it last week. He's incredibly one-dimensional on the feet. He's got really good leg kicks, powerful kicks, right? He's got a good jab too. But he just doesn't mix it up. He doesn't go to the body at all. He doesn't go to the legs at all. And, even when he has a guy like Dricus hurt, all he does is throw a left hand. That's it. And he's not like that aggressive with it either. So I don't know what to say. I mean, the fact that he's able to have success at all in moments, in fights when he's only using a left hand is pretty impressive. But if he just mixed it up, man, how can you go through all these training camps, all these years of training just to go into the fight and only throw one attack? It doesn't make any sense. Your opponents know exactly what's coming. And despite them knowing what's coming visually, you can see them putting their guard up like this. He doesn't throw anything else. And you can't be successful as a good striker when you only throw one attack. You don't have the power of a Deontay Wilder to be able to get by on not being very skilled because you just have one good shot. You don't have that kind of power in your left hand to be able to put guys away with just one good shot. And his grappling is terrible. In the first round, I was literally sad. I mean, I felt so bad watching Darren Till get pressed up against the fence and teed off on by Dricus du Plessis. Within 30 seconds, Dricus had him nailed up against the fence and he was wailing on him. That was a 10-8 round. And then at the end of the fight, just submits him with ease like he's nothing. I mean, it looked like he just quit. Takes him down like he's made out of feathers. Darren Till makes a big error on stuffing the takedown. Didn't have any technical ability to stop it. And Dricus was, didn't have tons of energy. I mean, he looked gassed as well. And as soon as he gets him out, Darren Till gives him the back. Within a second of Dricus having the choke in, Darren taps. Doesn't even try to fight it. And I'm honestly done saying it. I don't think Darren Till's very good. Because I can see you hitting pads in the gym. And I can see your past success. And I know how sharp you are with your strikes. And how great you are at keeping distance and staying safe on the feet. But if all you do is throw one strike, you're not good. You're just not good. Even though that one strike is really effective, you're not a good fighter. So Darren Till shouldn't be ranked. He would be a guy who can definitely beat up on guys outside of the rankings who are strikers. I think he should maybe move back down to welterweight. But again, the welterweight move, I mean, does that even make sense? Look at who's Darren Till is going to face, even if he gets a win over a guy like Daniel Rodriguez or Li Jingliang. If he beats one of these guys that are right outside of the rankings at welterweight or at the top of the division, I mean, at the top of the rankings, like around the 15 range, he's just going to have to face grapplers. It's grappling central in the welterweight division. Bilal Muhammad, Burns, Colby, Kamaru, Shavkat, Hamzat Chimaev, all grapplers. And he's not going to be able to have success there. At least in the middleweight division, he's going to be taking on a lot of strikers. Aside from Derek Brunson and Dricus Du Plessis, who know how to wrestle, I mean, it's a bunch of strikers up there. You know, I think he could have a chance to beat a guy like Paulo Costa if he fucking changes it up a little bit. Someone has to tell him to mix it up, because I don't really hear a lot of people mentioning that. He literally only throws one attack. And I hear people mentioning, you know, he doesn't have that much power, or he's not in shape, or he doesn't know how to stuff a takedown, not the best fight IQ, not as tough as he could be, but no one mentions the fact that he's so one-dimensional. And someone needs to tell him that. But I think he should maybe even stay at 185 and just take on guys that are outside the rankings, favorable matchups, take on strikers. You know, the Masvidal rematch is something that's decent, but 170, you're going on the big weight cut, and man, just take on cans. Just take on cans. As I've said, like, some of these guys like Darren Till, who are probably not going to be champion ever, who definitely won't be if he only throws a left hand. He'll never be champion unless he actually mixes it up. Why not just take on cans? Tell the UFC, hey, you know, I'm not going to be champ, but I'm a big name, and you know me, lad. I don't know if Darren Till says lad as much as Paddy, so I don't want to sound Australian, but, you know, come on. Give me some cans. Dana, give me cans. You know, give me a can. Just give him a can. Or go to Bellator. Go to another organization. Become a champion there. But his grappling's so bad. He can't even stuff takedowns from the Bellator guys either. So, Dricus Du Plessis, his grappling's really good. He's a tank. Obviously, he didn't look that great in the striking compared to Darren Till. But, you know, let's be honest. Darren Till's one of the better strikers in the division. He's hard to hit. So, I don't really take away from Dricus Du Plessis, but I'd like to see him maybe fight at Derek Brunson next. I think that's the right move. Derek Brunson, or maybe a Roman Dolidze. That'd also be a good matchup. So Bryce Mitchell and Ilia Topuria. Excellent fight. This one lived up to the expectations. You know, could Bryce Mitchell take Ilia Topuria down and have success? The answer was yes and no. He was able to get Ilia Topuria down in the first round, right before the last minute, and he didn't really do much with it. Wasn't really able to chain anything together as far as the submission goes, and wasn't really able to tee off on Ilia Topuria with damage. Now, Bryce Mitchell, despite getting finished and submitted, I mean, can we give Ilia Topuria some credit for submitting Bryce Mitchell? I knew that Ilia Topuria was a pretty strong grappler. He's a good wrestler. He has 100% takedown defense going into that fight. No longer 100% takedown defense. But man, to submit Bryce Mitchell, the white Habib, like as people were calling him going into this fight, where, you know, we obviously know that's not the case anymore, but to submit Bryce Mitchell, one of the best grapplers at featherweight, is really impressive. I don't think many guys in this division would be able to get Bryce Mitchell off of them. And I don't think many guys in the division would be able to stop Bryce Mitchell. There's only a handful of guys that would be able to not only stuff Bryce Mitchell's takedowns, but especially submit him. I think there's only one guy, and that's Ilia Topuria. Again, to submit a guy who has such good jiu-jitsu, granted he was hurt, he was rocked, and it wasn't a submission where these guys were, you know, in scrambles and rolling on the ground for a few minutes, where he was able to get the better of Bryce Mitchell, get a good position, and then find a submission. It wasn't like that. He was rocked, he was hurt, Bryce was shelling up against the fence, and Ilia Topuria, you know, submitted him. Great win, great finish, a vicious guy, Ilia Topuria. I mean, he's so dangerous. He has submission skills, he has phenomenal grappling, really good wrestling, and massive power in his hands. Probably one of the biggest power punchers in that division, aside from maybe Josh Emmett. Big power. I just want to know, how does this guy do in a 5-rounder? Because, you know, if there's anyone that I can see that may be a threat to a guy like Volkanovski in the future, it's Ilia Topuria, because he's the same build. And, you know, Chad Mendes gave Volkanovski a really tough fight. And I feel like you need to have a guy who's like the same stature of Chad Mendes with the same kind of power, if not more power, who's a little more well-rounded, who's more of a modern-day fighter, a little better skilled overall, to be able to maybe beat a Volkanovski. And Volkanovski's getting older, so if there's anyone that I'd have to say has the best chance to dethrone Volk right now in the future, it's going to be Ilia Topuria. But Bryce Mitchell actually did pretty well. He was landing a lot of good shots to the body, a lot of good kicks to the body, but the guy just doesn't have any power in his hands. He wasn't able to keep Ilia Topuria off of him, and Ilia Topuria just swarmed him. But Bryce Mitchell had some great moments. In the second round, he showed that his striking wasn't terrible. Like, it's actually pretty decent. It's just a guy like Ilia Topuria is so dangerous. And to run through Bryce Mitchell, that's crazy. I mean, people were speaking of Bryce as if he may be, as I said, the white Habib. But I think he's been exposed now because, I mean, is he going to be able to take out any really dominant striker? I mean, think about it like this. Ilia Topuria, great grappling, but Bryce Mitchell would have the same issues with Volkanovski. He might not get finished that soon, but I don't think he would have any success taking down Volk. And he'd get beat up for 5 rounds if Volk didn't finish him. And then you have Max Holloway, who has really good takedown defense. I think Max Holloway would smoke Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell versus Brian Ortega is a matchup that would be a really good matchup. But I think Yair Rodriguez would be able to, pick him apart. But again, was he exposed? It's just that Ilia Topuria is really good. So maybe he wasn't completely exposed. But is he ever going to be champion? No. Not when there's guys like Ilia Topuria in the division, guys like Max and Volk. So that just won't be the case. Especially a guy like, Mozvar Evloev, who's the Russian guy that he was supposed to fight this past month. But in general, a really good performance for Bryce Mitchell. And I know he was saying that I wasn't even there that night. That wasn't even me that night. I mean, literally, I wasn't even in the cage last night. I was sick. I had the flu. Even though I've gone on record saying flu ain't even real. I had the flu, and I wasn't myself. I mean, he can say all that. Even the healthiest Bryce Mitchell ever, in Bryce Mitchell's dreams, wouldn't beat Ilia Topuria. He's just not that guy. So Ilia Topuria, I think he should fight Brian Ortega, maybe Calvin Kattar. Let's get Brian Ortega a really tough matchup because I'm tired of seeing that guy in the top 3. Next up, Raul Rosas Jr. versus Jay Perrin. Really, really good matchup. Really good fight. Jay Perrin had a couple good moments in the first minute where he was able to land some good shots on Raul Rosas Jr. And that was the worry going into this was Raul Rosas Jr. going to be able to get his hands on a guy with pretty decent hands, good hand speed. But I think overall was he going to be able to get in there and have his way with a grown man in the UFC? And the truth was he was able to do that. And he did exactly what he was supposed to go out there and do, and that was to submit Jay Perrin. I didn't expect him to submit him in the first round. I actually thought that a decision might be more likely, but I'm really happy it was a submission. He got the rear naked choke. Excellent win for Raul Rosas Jr. I know he wants to be a champion by the age of 20, but we're not, living in the land of dinosaurs, guys. This is the modern day UFC. I understand that John Jones became a champion when he was really young, but there were dinosaurs in the UFC back then. That was a new sport back then. Now there are guys that have been training for a really long time that are young, that are getting into this. You see a guy like Song Yadong, who's in his early 20s, who, is losing to Corey Sandhagen, putting up a tough fight. Like, Song Yadong has all the talent in the world, really good power, but he's like 26. And I get it. Raul Rosas Jr. may be even better. We really don't know how good Raul Rosas Jr. could be. It's kind of unfair to relate him to a guy that's already 25, considering he's only, 18. That's like relating a guy that's 25 to 32. It's such a big gap, and that's crazy. But, let's not push Raul Rosas Jr. I feel like you got to give him another couple guys that are at the bottom of the barrel of the bantamweight division, and then you bump him up, But I don't want to see him taking on a ranked opponent in the next few years. Build this guy up slowly. You don't want to get him to be a can crusher because then he'll never really get to adjust to tougher opponents. Give him someone that's around the same level as Jay Perrin. Build his hype. I mean, this kid's 18 years old. He's from Mexico, so the UFC loves the Mexican market. Get this guy some good submission wins. Get him another favorable matchup. I don't want to see him fighting anyone that has serious finishing power. But again, we're not living in the land of dinosaurs. Sorry, Raul, but I doubt you're going to be champion by 20. It's all good though. Jairzinho Rosas. Well, I like Raul Rosas Jr. And again, we really don't know how good he is, right? We have to give him more time. We have no idea. I mean, he basically dominated that fight. So submitted him in the first round. Like, it was a perfect performance for Raul. Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Chris Daukaus. Okay. I've been saying this for a while. Chris Daukaus needs to either retire or drop down to middleweight. Not light heavyweight, but middleweight. I mean, I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek because, yeah, I think light heavyweight would still be a good move. But he's just so small for heavyweight. He's not a real heavyweight. He's lazy. He doesn't want to lose weight, and he thinks he's just a big guy because he's tall. You're tall, but you're no bigger than Edmen Shabhazyan. You know, you're like a massively fat Edmen Shabhazyan. You know what I mean? With absolutely a massive lack of muscle in the heavyweight division. You see guys like Jairzinho Rozenstruik, right? And they have a lot of fat on them. He's by no means shredded, but he's a big guy. Like, naturally, this dude's just big. Like, he's got a lot of muscle. His skin is still tight around the beer belly that he has. But Chris Daukaus is just all flabs, deflated balloon. And he's been knocked out 3 times in less than a calendar year. Knocked out by Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades, and now Jairzinho Rozenstruik in the first minute. He has no chin. He cannot take the punches at heavyweight. He cannot have success against anyone who's ranked at heavyweight. He can beat the old washed up, Shamir Abdurakimovs. He can beat those guys. The guys that he might even be able to beat a Parker Porter. But nowadays, after his chin is probably gone, I mean, come on, man. This guy had hype at one time, which is crazy to me. He'll never make it at heavyweight. I don't want to see him fight at heavyweight again. If this guy gets another heavyweight fight, then he has the worst management and family and friend circle ever because they're not being real with him. And they're either being delusional with him or they're not looking at reality and they're just closing their eyes. They're turning a blind eye to him, and that's not responsible. Chris Daukaus needs to be responsible, right? He needs to take care of his health. He needs to take care of his brain because he's been chinned 3 times in a row in the heavyweight division. And, he works as a cop. I'd hate to see this guy on the streets as a policeman with brain damage. I mean, that's certain policemen, they don't make the best decisions sometimes. You don't want them to end up on the news for making a weird decision. So, shout out to Chris Daukaus. I'm sure he's a good cop. But, let's keep him as a good cop. We don't want him to be a crazy cop. Let's keep him as a good cop. Chris Daukaus dropped down to light heavyweight, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik, great win for him. But again, I'm not putting too much stake in it. I saw someone say, Jairzinho and Ngannou rematch, that's looking pretty interesting now. Like, he just knocked out Chris Daukaus, right? His last fight was against Volkov, where he got knocked out in the first round. Like, let's pump the brakes. Give him maybe Tai Tuivasa when Tai comes back. But Ty's going to want to come back in like a year, if he's actually smart these days. So maybe Jairzinho should take on, I don't know, man. Who do you put him up against? Maybe Cyril Gane. That's a matchup that's never been made. I think that might be a decent fight, Jairzinho and Cyril Gane. That's a good match. I'd like to see it, but let's pump the brakes with the Ngannou stuff. He'd still get knocked out in the first round. I mean, he's good. He's got a lot of power, but he's not going to beat Ngannou. Edmen Shabhazyan, Dalcha Lungiambula. Great fight for Edmen Shabhazyan. He had a good game plan, which was to take his time, to pick his shots, to go to the body a lot, and was able to get the finish over Dalcha Lungiambula. Dalcha is a very dangerous guy. I mean, you just have to take one look at him to understand that he has a lot of power. You have to be careful with him, so you can't just go in there trying to take his head off in the first round, or else you'll be the one who's getting decapitated, if not him. So Edmen Shabhazyan looked really good, but I mean, I guess that's the right way to fight Dalcha, right? You got to take your time. A finish over him is good. Step in the right direction. Let's get Edmen Shabhazyan, another guy that's just outside of the rankings in the middleweight division. Who is he going to take on? That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe even a Chris Curtis. I think he'd be able to even beat a Chris Curtis. Let's get on to the Chris Curtis and Joaquin Buckley fight. But I'm happy for Edmen Shabhazyan because he had a really hard time, in his past 3 fights. He got finished 3 times in a row before going into that one. So Chris Curtis, Joaquin Buckley. I'm just going to say this. I heard the MMA guru say it, and he said it really well. He said Joaquin Buckley has to do a lot to be winning these rounds. And I saw the same thing. Chris Curtis, he needs to land a couple really good shots to have a big effect on Joaquin Buckley. And despite Joaquin Buckley having a lot of power, I think his power is a little bit overrated, right? Because he's not the biggest middleweight. He's a pretty jacked guy, but he's very short. He's got these, skinny legs. And he has to throw a lot of volume. But it's not necessarily that, he doesn't have the weapons. He just doesn't have the technique yet, right? He's not slick. He's not that fast. He kind of just spams different strikes. Like, he'll spam kicks to the body, kicks to the legs, kicks to the head. He'll just kind of go out there and spam his attacks. And he has a lot of tools in his tool bag. He has a lot of different ways to attack you, but none of them are coming at you with really, really good technical level. And they're not going to have a lot of power on it because of that. And Chris Curtis was able to just pick his shots. And what can I say? He caught a kick, and to catch a kick and knock a guy out after that is very impressive. So good hands from Chris Curtis. I got this one wrong. Guys, I did really well on this card, by the way. I did really well. I basically got all of my main picks right. Billy Quarantillo who do I want to see Chris Curtis fight next? I'm just going to say it. Chris Curtis is still not very good. I'm not a believer in Chris Curtis yet. He can beat the Joaquin Buckleys, but I don't think he's beating guys that are ranked. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. Next up, Billy Quarantillo and Alexander Hernandez. And same thing for Joaquin Buckley, guys. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back up to this. I think he's going to be a guy that's always, 15 to 30 as far as the rankings go. He'll always be outside of the rankings. He's still young, but, maybe just not the most talented guy. Billy Quarantillo, Alexander Hernandez. Really good win for Billy Quarantillo. This was his first fight since the Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, and Kamaru Usman, Colby 2 card, where he had a war with Shane Burgos. Really good fight. Broke Alexander Hernandez. Hernandez had a really good first round, but just gassed out. And, Billy Quarantillo, what a performance. Really tough guy. Really good win for Billy Quarantillo. Honestly, man, I think it's time to maybe move him up in the rankings. I mean, he's really good. He's a really tough guy. Really tough guy from New York. Excellent fighter. Really good hands. Great gas tank. And he said it perfectly going into this fight. He said, I was going to break Alexander Hernandez. And that's exactly what he was able to do. He broke him, picked him apart, and Alexander Hernandez wilted. Let's get Billy Quarantillo a ranked opponent. And Alexander Hernandez, I don't know, man. Maybe move him up to 55 again. But, man, I honestly, I think that guys, once they're getting destroyed right outside the rankings and when they've already passed that time where they're like a up-and-coming guy and they thought that they were going to be like maybe a champion one day, when they find out maybe I'm not going to be champion, I think it's time to start considering just making a career off of fighting bottom-of-the-barrel lightweights. And I understand it's really whoever the UFC offers you. That's who you're going to fight. That's who you're going to take, because the UFC is going to offer you a couple of fights, and if you turn them down, well, you're getting the boot. But if you can, fight the easiest opponents or maybe go to another organization. It's not going to go so well for you. TJ Brown, really good win. Cameron Simon, really good win. TKO. I picked him to win as well. So, really good prospect in Cameron Simon. I picked him to win. I picked Billy Quarantillo to win. I picked Edmen Shabhazyan. I picked Jairzinho, right? I picked Raul. I picked Topuria. I picked Duplessis. Anyway, guys, that's it for the UFC 282 breakdown. I'm going to have a prediction video on Sean Strickland and Jared Cannonier, and I'm going to look over that card as well. Really good card, to close out the year for the fight night this upcoming Saturday. Guys, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Until next time.